So there's only one PT on the whole continent, okay? And I was the only PTA on the whole continent of Antarctica. I mean, it's the craziest adventure I have ever been.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Dylan Callier. I'm a physical therapist and welcome to the New Medical Nomads podcast, where I get to document my journey as a medical traveler, as well as interview other experts within the traveling field. Now, the rules for the traveling game are constantly changing, so anything you hear on this show should be for entertainment purposes only. This is not legal, financial, or medical advice. Enjoy the show and safe travels. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. Today I am with Miss Dawn Rossi and we are going to talk about travels and traveling in a trailer and all the good stuff. Dawn, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are good. I am good.
Good.
Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how long you've been traveling and where you're at in the world right now?
Well, currently I'm in Fresno, California. I'm a physical therapist assistant, and for about 17 years I've been doing physical therapy assistant. And I'm also a massage therapist too, so I've done that for 24 years, so I have a lot of manual experience. My contract right now is in Fresno, California, at a inpatient rehab center, which is really nice. My tax home is in Anchorage, Alaska, so spent a lot of time in Alaska and love it. I'm very much an outdoor person. I'm a big hiker, big outdoor person. And I decided so doing this for 7 years has been like an adventure for sure. So.
Very, very cool. Very cool. And then you're traveling in your trailer. How long have you been in your mobile home?
I actually have been doing the mobile home for about 6.5 years now. So it is a 22-foot travel trailer. It's Coachman. It's an Apex. So, and before all this, I had no experience whatsoever of knowing how to even do anything. So I was just I just took the huge risk and just bought it. And boy, have I made some mistakes, and you just kind of learn from it. And yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the initial investments of the trailer?
Yes. So what I did, and I recommend this to a lot of people, is I went to RV shows. I looked around. I had been thinking about them. I had rented RVs of different kinds, making, on vacation and saying, okay, is this for me? I wasn't sure, So that was the best way of doing it, was okay, I went to Yellowstone. I rented an RV with some friends for a week, and trying to drive it and just, doing all the crazy things that you're going, wow, could I do this as a traveler? I went to RV shows, and then I had heard from some folks, because there are some end of season sales, okay, so that you could get better deals. Sometimes the RV companies want to just offload really quickly and make room for new models. So I knew exactly what I wanted when I went to all these shows. And then I started looking online, and I was up in Seattle, Washington at the time, looking online, and found what I wanted and made a deal through the internet.
Wow.
And I got half off. It's usually a $25,000 travel trailer for the 22-foot I have with the slide. And I made an offer, and I got it for $13,500. Wow. And I already got pre-approved from my credit union up in Alaska, and had it delivered to my next assignment. So they'll do deliveries, which is really nice. And so right now, I'm looking at the initial cost was 10% down, on that, and also probably it runs about $200 a month.
Okay.
So, but you also you have to make with a travel trailer. You have to really be careful because I thought I had a V6 Toyota Tacoma could pull my little travel trailer. And when you start going, you realize I needed something bigger. So I ended up going to Vegas and turning in my Tacoma for a Tundra. And then got something that could really pull my 22-foot travel trailer safely. So yes.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Have you pulled any trailers before you made this purchase?
No, absolutely no experience whatsoever. So I'm like, here I am with this 22-foot, 3,300 pound travel trailer. And I'm like, all my friends said, start backing up with it. Get into a parking lot, back up into small spaces, see if you can do it, get a feel for it. Because I had absolutely no experience. And luckily I never crashed the thing, For my first year or two, I kept calling RV parks and say, do you have pull-throughs? Do you have pull-throughs? So, because I was so scared I'm by myself, of course, as a woman, trying to back up something, but you get the experience and, and I got it down now, but
that's awesome.
It took a while. Yeah.
Learning curve.
It takes a while. Yes. A huge learning curve. Huge. Mm-hmm.
Got it. So you've been traveling this thing for about 6.5 years. What are some unexpected benefits that came along with it and an unexpected kind of learning experience?
So, like the benefits, I would hear from travelers, and they were like the horrifying experiences of trying to find housing. It can be expensive. You got all these down deposits. Mm-hmm. And then, they pull your contract and, it's like, oh gosh, and so with having having a travel trailer, one is that I'm not packing and unpacking all the time. Okay. I'm just stabilizing. Mm-hmm. Like, Velcro is your friend, in a travel trailer, because you just, you have to destabilize everything before you go on the road. So all the inside of your travel trailer is just familiar. It's always going to be familiar. It's just you're changing the outside. So I love that idea that my surroundings and the inside is still the same, no matter where I go. And so I like that ability. And then when you go to RV parks, they're not asking you to put down first month's rent, second, and the end months, like all this money up front. Usually I put down as a monthly payment on an RV park. It's like $100 deposit for the electric. That's it, and then you can just say at the last minute, like a week before, like, hey, I have to leave. And they're not going to charge you another month's rent. Okay. So there was always that advantage. But the downside of it, unfortunately, is that when I get an offer, like my recruiter will say, okay, these are available. Mm-hmm. And I look and before I even submit, I have to call look for RV parks. Okay. And, so sometimes and like in San Francisco or Los Angeles, you're not going to find RV parks, there might be places you just don't have, and you can't take those assignments that might be interested. So that's a huge challenge, but I found, sometimes people I would hear online and stuff, I would see is that they would say to me, like, wow, I can't find any RV parks because they're all booked for the summer. You'll hear about this in Oregon. But I tend to find when you call and you ask for a monthly, like, if, hey, do you have any monthlies? Sometimes RV park owners will say, no, there's a waiting list. And I found in my experience is if I call them up and I say, hey, look, I'm a traveling physical therapist assistant, or if you tell them you're travel nursing and you're going to be on assignment for 13 weeks and I'm looking for housing, I'm telling you, they changed their mind completely. And they're saying, oh, we have a space for you. We always have spaces for you guys. It seems like the traveling construction workers and the traveling, therapists or nurses, they say, oh, no, we have a space for you. And I'm shocked by that. So I tell people, make sure you tell them exactly who you are, because they love us. The RV parks love us, okay, because we're very consistent,
Yeah.
especially for monthly. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense from a business standpoint that for sure 3 months would be better than, somebody coming in from 2 weeks to a month. And also use almost your title, because there's a difference between you being a healthcare professional versus maybe some college kids coming down for 4th of July or something like that, or even comparing ourselves to like construction workers. They're confident that you're not going to be causing trouble, stirring up stuff, drugs, paraphernalia, things like that I imagine kind of go on with the RV parks. So I could definitely see why using that rather than just asking for the monthly, and then using your weight of saying, hey, I'll potentially be here for 3 months, or I will be here for 3 months, and that would change.
Yeah, because we're quiet, we pay our money on time. It's amazing what RV park owners have told me. And they say, and we tell you, as soon as you tell them that, it's amazing that they just like, oh no, we have like 3 spots, and I'm like, where did that come from? And so they hide these things because they just are very, very cautious of what these monthly people that are coming in, so yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And then before we got recording, we were kind of talking about, you had a trip up into, was it Antarctica that you went to?
Well, yeah. So I tell people, because they'll ask me, how did you get started in travel? And actually in 2003, being in Alaska, I have a lot of friends that do seasonal work, and they'll work in the summers up in Alaska. And then they got on this deal where they went to Antarctica, and they worked for the National Science Foundation that contracts with Raytheon Polar Services. So this was my original travel job, and it wasn't with like a recruiting firm. So my friends told me about this crazy job with the government that's 4 months long. So, and it was an extreme thing. I mean, it was, it was like, there's only one hospital in Antarctica. Okay. So and I heard through the grapevine, and I contacted Raytheon Polar Services, the medical department. And the guy was like, how did you know about this job? We just submitted it as a government, and it was a PTA job.
Okay.
And he just took on like a PT in the, at Raytheon Polar Services at McMurdo General Hospital. So there's only one PT on the whole continent, okay? And I was the only PTA on the whole continent of Antarctica. I mean, it's the craziest adventure I have ever been, and it was the start of my travel adventures.
Okay.
So I work with them. You go to the Denver office, and then they fly you to Christchurch, New Zealand, which is where the Antarctic terminal is, and they have all their cold weather gear. You get your cold weather gear there, and then you fly down with the military. The military is the one that flies the flights to Antarctica. So I'm on I'm flying with the military, C-141 or C-17, and you're like there with all of their cold weather gear, and I'm thinking, I'm I'm going to the bottom of the world for my assignment for physical therapy, so. And it was such an adventure. I loved it. It's a 4-month contract. You do October through February, and my patients are actually the science support teams, okay, or the scientists, because really the scientists are so bright and brilliant, but they fall on the ice and they hurt themselves all the time in Antarctica. So but it would be so expensive to fly them to New Zealand for care. So we would see them for, overuse syndromes and, all kinds of weird things. And my job was to go into the departments and actually put together preventative programs. Okay. So stretching programs and all this stuff. So it was a fascinating. It was my start of doing traveling, and it wasn't recruiting. So, but it was definitely an adventure. That was an extreme adventure. And they don't do PTA jobs anymore because they did a budget cut down there, but they had such success. They have PTs that go down. So McMurdo and the South Pole Station, and I think there's another station that they started using PTs.
I see.
So, and if anybody's interested in that, they can contact me, and I'll try to find out who the new contractor is, because it's not Raytheon Polar Services anymore.
That's amazing.
So.
Yeah, my next question was going to be how to apply for those jobs, because I don't
yeah,
know,
you know,
one of the outside like government contracting civilian workers that you would go to on a website, or how it's
right. If you look at the Antarctic program and you do a search for it, and I know that they recently, because they used to be all huddled together, and I know that the National Science Foundation, like Raytheon Polar Services, had the contract with the government to do this, extreme thing, and then every 10 years they get a new contract. National Science Foundation will go to another contractor. Okay. Honestly, this was in 2003, 2004 season, and then I did 2004, 2005 season. So they changed over somewhere in 2010. Okay. So I can find out from my friends who that contractor is, because then they made the medical contractor completely different. They separated it too. So they have another contractor that is different. So I need to find out who that is. And I have lots of contacts. I'll find out exactly who you need to do to find out these PT jobs down there. So
well, I'll be sure to put your contact info in the show notes, and if anybody's interested, they can reach out to you.
It is, they don't pay very well, but I'm telling you, it's the adventure. It was just amazing. Okay, it's amazing.
Yeah. And then how is that coming back from Antarctica? So I imagine you like signed up for this thing and everybody's looking at you like you're crazy. Going to work at a workshop or whatever.
For me, it was pretty adventurous. Like, I would have to say, because Antarctica, I lived in Alaska and I've been on the slope, which is extreme north, but I didn't realize, like, Antarctica, there's just nothing that grows there. You might as well have landed on the moon for all I know, okay? I mean, they could do training for, all the astronauts starting in Antarctica because there's no vegetation smell. So that was the biggest thing for me coming off the ice, where you're only seeing, snow, ice, and rock and no vegetation, that when you come back into New Zealand, at 10,000 feet, you can smell grass in the air, and your senses are completely like, you don't have that. You lose that. And so it's a very, Antarctica is a really, really strange place, amazing place. Like, I thought the remote places in Alaska were amazing. No, Antarctica probably took more of my breath away of how vast and remote everything is. Yeah.
I'm imagining like this hospital in the middle of just as far as I can see, snow and ice.
Actually, McMurdo General Hospital used to be a Navy base, okay? In McMurdo Station is. And McMurdo General Hospital used to be part of this Navy spread, okay? And so the Navy, up until 1996, did all part of the research what the government was part of, the science research that goes down there. They stopped doing that, and then they started contracting with other places. Okay. McMurdo General Hospital, the station is actually about 1,200 people. It's a huge place. So there's lots of stuff to do. And then so it's on a rock, basically. It's on a little island, and you're surrounded by sea ice, and it's crazy. But it's crazy busy in their summer, which is our winter. It's crazy busy. Okay. And because then all we're doing is, we are science support people that are helping the scientists get out to remote camps and do their research. And there are accidents that happen all the time. You just have to prepare for that. And that's one of the things that we did at the hospital. I was also part of the team in case there was a mass casualty drills that we would do, because there would be, it could be airplane accidents and stuff, and we would have to prepare for that, because we were the only thing on the entire continent of Antarctica. So that was pretty extreme. For me, thinking, oh my gosh. So you're always prepared. You're always preparing for things, and even as the, physical therapist and physical therapist assistant, we would be helping out, for a mass casualty situation. So that was exciting too, for sure.
So did you do a year-long contract then?
No, 4 months. That's all you have to do. Yeah. And it's like having a 13-week assignment, It was only from October to February. That was it. So, you know, and that's the thing is because like, and they do year contracts too. But honestly, I think 4 months was enough, you know, because, you know, and, you know, during that time, the sun never sets. The sun just spins up in the sky. So it's 24 hours of light.
Oh,
in the
wow.
summer. It's very intense. It's more intense than I ever experienced in Alaska, for sure. So yeah. So and I wanted to go for the experience because the penguins and the, you know, and all the crazy stuff that we got to see. So yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those adventures of getting outside of that little community? Do you go on like
yes.
You're going with the scientists? Are you like along with them in teams, or how does that work?
So you have to take, in order to go outside the station, you have to do a few things. Yeah, I had to take a survival class and like spend the night in a tent in Antarctica. So I did do that. I had to do sea ice training because so those are the things that you had to learn. And as soon as you got those things under the belt, then you're allowed. There are because the whole station is surrounded by ice and sea ice and then glaciers. You have to stay on certain trails that have been marked. Okay, so in order you can go you know, you can go hike and stuff, but you would have to it was crazy, but you would have to say, okay, I'm leaving to go on a hike. And I would go to the fire station. We actually had a fire station in McMurdo, and sign out your name and take like a CB radio with you, like a portable radio. Okay. And then you can go hike because you would have what's called herbies, which is these storms that can come in at any time, and your visibility would be down to nothing. Wow. Know? And so you really have to prepare because the weather can change so drastically. So I would, you know, so I would go hiking and stuff, and you just keep an eye on the weather. But along the hikes will be these little isolated little stations, and so if what we call a Herbie would come in, you can hide out in there and tell them, I'm okay, I'm here. So you know, so that's like crazy too, you know. So so you had to do all these things before you're allowed to go outside the station. Okay, so yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then you came back to the States and you were just like, I want to continue doing this. I mean, that's almost a perfect amount of time to mimic what a travel contract would be.
Well, when you have such like, okay, so when you have that kind of craziness, you know, I came back to the States. I did want to spend some time in Alaska, and I did spend another 6 or 7 years. I bought a home in Alaska, but then in 2010, my dog passed away, and I said, okay, I'm going to go travel now. And that's when I left, you know. Okay. And so I had a home, you know, the tax home was Alaska. And so I left to go on my adventures after that.
Got it. Yeah. You're describing those herbies, and it sounds like you're on a different planet. And that's like,
I'm telling you, it is. It's like should have been on Mars. I mean, it's that crazy and that adventurous. And somebody who lives, you know, spent 18 years in Alaska. I mean, I'm a big outdoor person. I've been out in the bush communities, but to have the experience in Antarctica was like, whoa. I mean, it was whole other ball game. It was kind of like being on the moon. I mean, I felt like that sometimes because there was so many, you know, it's a very, very remote, and, you know, I mean, people have passed away, you know, have died because they fell in glaciers, you know, into crevasses that were unexpected. And so they put forth a big thing down in Antarctica to protect people, especially people who are not military anymore. You know, these are like people under contract that never, you know, they're civilians. So you have to teach them a lot of stuff about the safety hazards, you know, of being in Antarctica, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh. All right. So I guess just kind of moving on down the list.
Sure.
Is there any books or podcasts or personalities that you kind of follow? And this can be for traveling, or this can just be for your own interests.
Well, my books, I do some reading. Some of the things I like, I do, of course, because I travel the world. I mean, that's my big thing. And so I have a lot of travel books I look at, Lonely Planet. I also, you know, I mean, my next big adventure is going to be New Zealand, Australia, and Bali coming up. So I do a lot of, travel books and traveling, looking at different things. I'm a big fan because I'm a big hike, of Wild of Cheryl Strayed. I love her stuff. So, and a lot of hiking books, so when I go and do a lot of travels, I'd like to do a lot of hikes too. So, I did Machu Picchu 2 years ago in Peru. And so I have a lot of hiking books, and one of them will be like 101 hikes in Northern California, and I'm also a big fan of hikes that have hot springs with them too. Okay. So so that's my big thing, is like finding these remote hot springs and hikes that find them. So off remote path stuff, I'm really big into. I really like it. And so of course, I'm like turning 53 next month, and so I'm old school. So podcast is like a big new thing for me. And and so the funniest thing, because I work with lots of different people. I met people from all over the world, living in Alaska and stuff like that. The newest podcast in the last probably 6 months, and like I'm almost embarrassed to say that I do this, but I've had a few patients tell me about, patients tell you things all the time, and things that are just really interesting stuff, and so some of the things I've had patients tell me, like a couple times, that they in Northern California and up in Alaska, is that they've had some Bigfoot experiences. And I'm like, what? I mean, it's like bizarre, right? And so one of my friends got me hooked on what's called Sasquatch Chronicles, and I listened to that and their Bigfoot encounters, and it's amazing. It's like the only thing I listen to, because I'm like enthralled by people who don't want to give their names. These are like hunters and people, and they're like, I had this experience, and I'm not going to tell you my name, but they tell you these wild stories, and I'm like hooked on it, and some of my friends are. So that's the only thing I kind of like on big road trips that keeps me like, wow, it's like a storytelling, Yeah. Whether you believe it or not, it's like fascinating to me. So I don't know why I got into that, but I am so old school. I'm trying to understand podcasting, and so yeah, but like I'm almost embarrassed. I'm like, it's like kind of going around campfires and telling you ghost stories or whatever. I think what I enjoy the most is that it's like telling a crazy story, that and so, but it is interesting that how patients tell you things, and you're like, what? Like they'll tell you things that they won't tell their families, and so, whether it's like, did you know my house is haunted? You're like, what? Like they won't tell their families, they won't tell their friends, but they'll tell their therapists, So it is, and I take it for whatever, I listen to those kind of things as like, wow, that's interesting, whether I believe it or not, right. So yeah.
Well, I used to, so throughout my schooling to become a physical therapist, one of the many jobs I had was to be a rehabilitation aide. So I'd just basically run around the clinic, fold towels, talk to patients, things like that. I'd always tell them I'm just a glorified towel folder. And it was a really fun job, because you just got to interact with people, and you're still learning and kind of sponging up information. But one of the other aides that I worked with, she's now in PT school, she bumped into a group who would go out and do Sasquatch hunts.
Oh, it's so huge now.
With them for a night, and she just like randomly met them. She's telling me the story. I was like, "You're lucky you didn't get like abducted."
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah. In their van, and we drove somewhere. They have like the sound equipment, and they're like, "Oh, did you hear that?" And she's like, "No, I didn't hear anything." And so she's just going through this whole story, and oh my gosh, it was so funny. So
well, it is interesting, because you hear stories, and and like guys who are hunters. Of course, they would never. I mean, that's the big thing, what I'm learning of these things is that, if they see something that they don't understand and they tell their family, and their family ridicules them. So this is a place that you go, yeah, I ran into this. And they tell you things, which is really interesting, because I spend so much, enormous amount of time outdoors, and they'll describe something, and I'm like, and I go, oh my God, I heard that when I was outside, but I thought it was a bird, you know? And so to me, it's like interesting, you know, it is fascinating. So I'm actually more entertained than anything else, but I find it's like a really big thing. I had no idea. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you found your guilty pleasure.
Oh, it is. It is. And it totally keeps me going when I have to go from one job to another. So I find it very interesting. So yeah.
Mine tends to be Disney. So growing up, that's my guilty pleasure. It's like the big secret thing that I don't tell my guy friends or anything like that. I'll sit down and I'll have Mulan in the background working on podcasts or whatever.
Right.
But my uncle growing up, he used to be an artist for Disney. And so every other summer we would go down and go to Disney World. And
yes.
So like I didn't have a chance. My mom like had every VHS like in the house and just always yep, I'm a big Disney nerd. But
yeah, we all have our guilty pleasures, right? Yeah, for sure.
Well, Dawn, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, I think one of the questions, I think it was kind of fascinating, is, when you asked me about what you would tell people who are trying to get into maybe buying a travel trailer. And I would say if they want to travel with an RV or whatever, to maybe on their vacations is to rent one, and, I get this all the time. People say, okay, like, I'm going to go to Alaska. Tell me what I should do when I go to Alaska. Should I take a cruise? Should I do this? And I always say, you know what? You're too young for cruises. Don't do the cruise. Okay. I mean, unless you're older and you like those things, but I say rent an RV when you go to Alaska. There's many, and then you can go and explore. You can have that, whether you go to Yellowstone or wherever. But Alaska is a good place, I always say, to rent an RV. And then you can decide if this RV thing might be interesting for your travels, bringing instead. And you can have the adventures of going to Alaska, because I think seeing Alaska by RV is a lot more flexible, because the weather can change so drastically in Alaska. So, and it's your hotel, it's your car, and then it's also, you can, make food and stuff like that. So, Got it. Yeah. So, and I think that's the best way to do that too.
How is staying warm during those Alaskan visits?
Well, a lot of people will do it only in the summer, so it's fine. There's no problems. The RVs have their own, a propane heater. I do that for when I go, but then I have a little electric heater when I'm more stable, here. So I think it's just fine. I actually think it's a great way because, tent camping, in Alaska, I always got really nervous with the bears, and it's when you're in a remote place and everything, I sleep more soundly when I'm in a RV. I don't sleep very well when I'm tent camping in Alaska. Yeah, because I'm always like, what was that? And so I don't sleep. And I already had my 800-pound grizzly experience.
Oh my God.
Hike. Yeah. And I tell you, it's best to see it when you're from your RV or your car, not when you're on a trail, because that was enough for me to scare the living daylights out of me.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so my friends and I, we were coming down. I've actually done the Alcan Highway a couple, 6 times in my years, and we decided to take a more remote path called the Callier Highway. So you have the main highway, but Callier Highway, way back in the 90s, was still a gravel road, and it was almost probably 500 miles. So it's more inland. And so we went to this little remote town where they filmed the same movie where Robin Williams and this other guy, they did this one movie in Alaska, and Insomnia. I think it was called Insomnia. This is the same town that they had filmed it. And so we decided, let's go camp way up in this, this arm, because it's more on southeast Alaska. So we came in this little town, and the locals told us about they said, hey, if you go up more, this is a good season right now. You can see the grizzlies feeding the salmon, you know, and I said, oh, okay. So my friend and I decided to go see the grizzlies, right? So we get out, it's more in the morning, probably about 10 a.m. or so. And there is a park ranger, and he's got this huge canister of pepper spray.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, we'll be okay. We're going to be doing fine, right? So I'm walking this path, and you can see salmon jumping on the left-hand side in this creek. And so I'm like walking, and there was kind of a couple other people, and my friend and I were there. And the next thing you know, I look over to the right, and this 800-pound grizzly just comes up onto the path of the trail. And I'm like, I mean, it looked like it belonged into another world. You just cannot imagine how huge, because it wasn't tall. It's as wide as a VW bug. Okay. Wow. I mean, and it's coming at you, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know. So the ranger came, and he got between us and this bear, and he walked within probably 20 feet of us, around us. And he was very kind of a little aggressive, you know. He kind of was doing this weird noise. I couldn't explain it, but I just stood still for a second. And then all of a sudden he got distracted because the salmon were jumping in the water, and he just went, you know, he just ran after the salmon. So, and I was like, whoo, thank goodness the salmon caught his attention. And after that, I got, you know, I said, okay, I'm done. Turned around and I went back to my car. I'm like, okay, that's all I need, you know. I mean, and I say your experience of a bear, have it from when you're inside a car, because you know, my first thing I wanted to do was run. I really wanted to run, and that was a really bad idea. But then you just sit there and you're not supposed to run. Don't run. So yeah. So
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some classmates of mine, and they had a clinical up in Alaska, and they were talking about those experiences. How if you go on like a run, a lot of the residents there will take a gun with them or take the bear spray. I thought they were kidding about the bear spray. I thought that was like, you know, headlighter fluid or something like that, and they're just trying to pull my. No, it's an actual thing.
Yeah. And they're huge, you know. It's a pepper spray, but yeah. But you know, I realized I wasn't really a big gun person, you know, because I grew up on the East Coast and everything. But in Alaska, after having that 800-pound grizzly experience, I said, okay, I understand how important guns are. You really do. I mean, you're just like, yep. Okay, now and when living in Alaska, you have respect for guns. You do. I mean, it's an automatic thing, you know. So yes. Yes.
Did they teach you to do the hey bear, no bear while you're doing all on
that? Yeah, they teach you those things, you know. But I was like, so, you know, because like if it's coming towards you, yes, you're going to say, hey, you know, because they're kind of blind. They smell you, but they don't really see very well. But I was so frozen in fear, I couldn't even get out. You know, you're just like, this thing is it's so numbingly like humongous that you're like, you can't. It's like probably my if I had my first, you know, Bigfoot experience, you're like, oh my God, how can this animal even be living on this planet? And because it's not something you see every day, you know. And it's like, and you just are just frozen in fear, because you're like, okay, and it was the first time in my life that I realized, like, wow, you know, unless you're in the city and somebody, you know, tries to rob you with a gun, it's like that. You have no control, you know, and you're like, you know, but it's an animal, and, you know, and it just amazes me, you know, it's amazing to me. It just blows me away for sure.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for that story.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We'll wrap up here. Did you have a way that you would like the listeners to contact you? I'll be adding you to the New Medical Nomads group, and so
sure,
if the listeners want to join there, you can direct questions straight to Dawn from there.
Okay, they can do that, or I have an email too. Okay. It's rossidm32@yahoo.com. And we can probably put that back up there if they have any questions for me.
Okay. Yep. I'll put that down there for anybody interested in Antarctica or Sasquatches or grizzly bears.
Oh yeah, or any traveling in Alaska or yes. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And for the listeners, if you want to catch the next episode, I'll be officially launching them on the New Medical Nomads podcast page. You can follow us along there, or if you want early access, you can go to YouTube. I usually put them there about a week or two in advance, and you can join the channel, subscribe. But yeah, if you're listening on iTunes, listening on Stitcher, thumbs up, like us, show us some love. It'll help us get our information out there, and we greatly appreciate it. But Miss Dawn, thank you so much for joining me today and bringing all your stories.
Thank you very much for having me here, guys.
And you have safe travels.
Thank you. You too.